Welcome to this WiseOwl Excel VBA tutorial. In this video we'll explain how to return and how to deal with multiple result sets from an SQL query. We'll start with a reminder of how to return a single result set using ADO connections and record sets. Then we'll look at how you can write multiple select statements in the source of a record set and how you can write the code to retrieve the next result set in the sequence. We'll continue then looping through until we've run out of result sets to return, and we'll finish the video with a quick look at how to return multiple result sets from a store procedure and deal with those multiple result sets in the same way. So not a particularly long video, but let's get started. Before we get started, there are a couple of things you'll need. First of all, a copy of the files that I've created for this video. I'll stick a link so that you can download this folder in the video description, and when you've extracted that folder you should find that it contains two separate files, one to create the WiseOwl Movies database and then one to create a store procedure just for later on in the video. If you need to execute these files, then of course you'll need to have SQL Server installed. So if I have a quick look at our tutorials which explain how to create or install SQL Server 2017 Developer Edition, which is free, or SQL Server 2016 Developer Edition, which is also free. So either one, you can take your pick. Both will work for this video. If you want to follow along with exactly what I'm doing, you will also need a copy of the Microsoft OLEDB driver for SQL Server. It's a very small download, just about 5 megabytes. You can download and install it in just a couple of minutes. But that doesn't come along currently packaged with a SQL Server installation, so you will need to install that one separately. Once you've got hold of all those things, if you haven't already installed the WiseOwl Movies database, you'll need to open up SQL Server Management Studio and connect to an instance of SQL Server. I've already done that here. My instance is called SQL 2017 Training, stored on my local machine, and I'll need to execute the script for creating the WiseOwl Movies database. If I choose to open up an existing file from the open button there and point to my desktop, look in the folder that I've extracted and then open up file number 1, Create Movies Database 2016. When that file is opened, the font size is a bit big there, let me zoom out a little bit. Once I've opened that file, I can then just execute it by clicking the execute button, and I'll end up eventually, shouldn't take too long, it's not a particularly large database in the grand scheme of things. When it successfully executes, we should be able to refresh the databases folder in the Object Explorer window and see we now have a movies database available. So at that point I'm going to switch over to Excel, and when I have headed there I can open up a brand new blank workbook, which I've already done, head to the Developer tab, open up the Visual Basic Editor and then insert a new module into our project. As usual for this little set of videos, we'll need to set a reference to the Microsoft ActiveX Data Objects library. So let's head to the Tools menu and choose References, and then when the dialog box opens we can scroll through the list to find Microsoft ActiveX Data Objects. And I'm going to go for version 6.1, which is the latest version I have available. And once I've checked the box I can click OK. That'll give us some help with the IntelliSense when we write the code to connect to that instance of SQL Server. So let's create a quick subroutine now, and let's call this one Get Data from SQL Server. And then the first thing we'll do in there is declare a variable which can hold a reference to an ADODB connection object. So dim cn as ADODB.connection. I can then create a new instance of the connection class by saying set cn equals new ADODB.connection. And then I can set the connection string property of the connection object by saying cn.connectionString equals. And then if I just break this line across multiple lines by using the space underscore continuation character, I'll start by entering the provider name first of all. And the provider name is equal to, at least if you're using the same provider that I pointed out earlier on, the new Microsoft OLEDB driver for SQL Server. The name of that is MS OLEDB SQL. I'll then type in a semicolon and then I'll concatenate the next part on a new line. And then the next part is the server name. So I can say server equals. And again, my instance of SQL is on my local host, so I can either enter my machine name or I can type in localhost, or I can just shortcut that with a full stop followed by a backslash, and then the name of the instance in my case is SQL 2017 Training. I can then enter a semicolon and close that string and then concatenate onto the next line the name of the database that I want to connect to. That's nice and easy. We know that that's movies. We've just installed it, followed by a semicolon, and then concatenate one final line. And I'm going to say trusted connection equals yes. And this indicates that I'm using my Windows credentials to connect to a Windows authenticated SQL server, which is how I installed and configured the software when I first installed it. So there's the connection string created. We should always quickly test that we can both open and then close the connection. So we can say cn.open followed by cn.close with a few blank lines in between. And then if I just use the F8 key to step through, we'll hopefully find when I say cn.open that nothing happens, indicating it's working basically. Nothing has gone wrong, and I can close the connection and then end the subroutine. Next, we'll create a record set to grab a set of results from the database. So let's declare a new variable called rs as an adodb.recordset. After we've opened the connection, we can create a new instance of the Recordset class by saying set rs equals new adodb.recordset. And then we can set a few basic properties of the record set. Let's say rs.activeConnection first of all, and that's nice and easy. That's just the connection we've just opened. We can then also set a couple of optional properties. We don't need to do this, but it's always nice to be specific or explicit about these sorts of things. So let's say rs.cursor type equals, we're going to go with the AD open forward only, which is the fastest type available if we only need to make one pass through the set of records to read them out, which is what we're going to do. AD open forward only is the best one for performance. We can then also say rs.locktype equals, and as we're only going to be reading records and not trying to change anything, we'll say adlock read only. The final property we're going to set is the record set source. So I'm going to do that by setting the source to be a very basic select statement. I'm going to say rs.source equals, and then I'm going to enter into a set of double quotes something very simple like select full name, comma, DOB from actor. And that's my basic select statement, selecting the full name field and the DOB field from the actor table. I can explicitly qualify the reference to the actor table with the name of the schema to which it belongs, which in this case is DBO actor. And if you're not sure about any of that and how SQL select statements work, we do have a full tutorial on writing SQL queries. And you can also go back and check in the movies database the names of the objects. If you expand the movies database followed by expanding the tables folder, you can then find the act table there in the DBO schema. You can then expand that table and then expand the columns folder in there to find a list of available columns. So having done all that, what we should also do is quickly check that we can both open and then close the record set. So I'm going to say rs.open. And then I'm going to say rs.close. Now it's worthwhile mentioning that you don't technically need to close the record set. If you close the connection set, close the connection that the record set is associated with, it automatically closes down any record sets associated with it. So if I use the F8 key to step through, if I don't bother explicitly closing the record set, because the very next thing I would do would be to close the connection anyway, which closes down the record set automatically. Let's leave it at that for the time being. After opening up the record set, what I'd like to do is write its contents out into a new worksheet. And just as we've done in previous videos in this little series, we'll write a separate subroutine to allow us to do that. So I'll give myself a few blank lines below the first one just to make it slightly easier to see what I'm doing. And I'll create a new subroutine called write results to worksheet. I'll then declare a parameter for this subroutine, which will be called something like result set as an adodb.recordset. So we can pass a reference to our record set into this subroutine. We don't need to do too much here just for demonstration purposes. What I'll do is I'll first of all say dim ws as worksheet, and then I'll use that variable to create a new worksheet object and capture a reference to it as well. So I'll say set ws equals worksheets.add, and that will create a new worksheet and automatically activate it. You may remember from previous videos in this series that there is a little odd bug about when you create a new worksheet and then copy all the data from a record set immediately, Excel doesn't seem to have caught up with itself, and we get some odd bugs to do with formatting, particularly for dates. And even weirder things go wrong if we didn't have a worksheet selected in the first place when we executed the code. So just to avoid those little problems, and if you want a reference to those problems, have a look back at the earlier videos in this little sequence. I'm just going to say ws.select before I do anything else. And then what I'm going to do is write the results from my record set out into that new worksheet. So I'm going to say simply ws.range A2, I'm going to leave a bit of space for some column headings later on, dot copy from record set, and then I can refer to my result set parameter. Having done that, let's just very quickly go back to the previous subroutine and we can make a call to our write results to worksheet procedure. And then we can pass in our rs variable to the result set parameter. So having done all that, now we can just run the original subroutine again, and that will automatically call the write results to worksheet, creating a new worksheet with a set of basic output containing the actors' names and the actors' dates of birth. Okay, so at this point we're successfully getting a single result set from our record set. But it is possible to get a record set which holds multiple result sets. And in order to demonstrate that, what we're going to do is head back to the Visual Basic Editor, and we're just going to extend the record set source. So just to give myself a little more space here, what we'll do is separate this out onto a different line. So we'll say rs.source equals, and then I'll use the space underscore continuation character, and then take the first select statement onto the next line. In order to separate one select statement from the next, I must have a semicolon character to separate them. So if I complete my first select statement with a semicolon, the semicolon statement terminator is optional in Microsoft TSQL, which is the language used by SQL Server. You can optionally always include it if you like, but it isn't always necessary. It's probably good practice to put it in, but I'm frankly often too lazy to do it. I've been doing it for such a long time without using the semicolon that I often just miss it out from sheer laziness. Anyway, let's use good practice here. We need it in this case to separate one select statement from the next. What we can then do is use the concatenation. So just as we did for the connection string, we can concatenate another string using the space underscore character, and then in some more double quotes, just to make life slightly easier at this point, I'm going to copy and paste that first query, in fact, and then I'm going to refer to the director table. Now, conveniently for me, the column names in the actor and director table are actually the same, full name and DOB. This definitely is not a requirement, by the way. It does not matter at all if your column names match or not between the two different queries here. These are completely separate select statements containing or returning completely different result sets. I'll concatenate just one more select statement as well, just to tie this up. Let's have another ampersand and underscore, and then we can have another select statement. This time, let's say select title. And then we can say, let's go for runtime minutes, and then release date, and then we'll also have Oscar wins, just to prove that the column names and the order and the number of the columns doesn't matter at all. I'll select those 4 columns from the film table, or from dbo.film, I should say, and then end that statement with a semicolon, although it's not required for that final query, and then close the double quotes. Okay, so we've got a slightly more complicated record set source now, 3 separate individual queries being run. However, if I run my get data from SQL Server subroutine at this point, I'll end up with one new worksheet which only contains the same results that we've already seen, just a list of actors and the dates of birth of those actors. So no matter how many result sets your query contains or your record set contains, if you open it, it only returns the first set of results, and that's what we're writing out into our new worksheet. In order to get the next set of results from the record set, we can use the next record set method of the record set object, which itself returns a record set object. This is a little bit confusing, but the simplest way to make this work, after we've written out the results to the worksheet for the first record set we've returned, we can then set rs to be equal to rs.nextResult. next record set. So that loads the next set of records into the record set, and then what we'd like to do at that point basically is go back to write results to worksheet. So let's set up a basic little loop. We'll have a simple do until loop. So we'll say do and then loop. Now I'll indent the next two lines inside that loop. The point at which we want to stop looping is when we run out of record sets to retrieve. And if we do that using the technique we've set up here, setting RS to be the next record set when there aren't any record sets left, essentially means that RS will be equal to nothing or contain nothing. So we can write our loop to say do until RS is nothing. And that will automatically carry on looping round until we run out of record sets. It's all relatively straightforward actually, isn't it? So let's just run that one again. So we've got 3 separate record sets or result sets we should return. We've currently got 3 worksheets in the workbook. If we run this subroutine again now, we should end up with 6 worksheets, and each one of these worksheets should contain a different set of results. There's a set of films, there's a set of directors, and there's the set of actors one more time. Now, as well as being able to write out multiple queries for your record set source, you might also refer to, for instance, a stored procedure in your database which returns multiple record sets. If I return to SQL Server Management Studio and then just close down the script which I used to create the movies database, I can then choose to open up another existing file, and we'll go for file number 2 this time in the set of files you downloaded. So I'll choose to open up Create Certificate Results Procedure. Now, this isn't a particularly complicated procedure. It's essentially the same select statement written out 6 times, selecting films with a particular certificate. So there's a join involved here in the from clause to join the film table to the certificate table. And then each of these queries selects, for instance, U films, PG rated films, 12, 12A, 15 and 18 rated films. So 6 separate result sets altogether. I'm going to execute that procedure this script to create my store procedure, so I can do that first to create my store procedure successfully. And if you wanted to see where your stored procedure lives, you can expand your movies database to the programmability folder, and then expand that, and then expand the store procedures folder to find your new store procedure there, get certificate results. To execute that store procedure and return 6 result sets is nothing more difficult than referring to the stored procedure name for the record set source. So if I switch back to Visual Basic at this point, or my Visual Basic editor, I can, let's just comment out the lines I've written here so far. I'll select all those lines and comment them out, and then I can say rs.source equals, and then I can simply say get certificate results. I should have just copied and pasted that name from the SQL Server Management Studio, but get certificate results. Okay, having done that, I can now run this subroutine, and I've got 6 worksheets at the moment. I should end up with another 6 if I run that one again, and there we go, I'm up to worksheet number 12. So each of these worksheets now contains films from with a particular certificate, so 18 films, 15, and 12A, and 12, and PG, and U. All that really remains at this point is to tidy up the result sets that we return. So for instance, we can create the column headings for each result set and then change the column widths, etc. So back into the Visual Basic editor, we can do all this in the write results to worksheet routine. And we've done this sort of thing in previous videos in this series. So if you're bored of doing that by now, feel free to switch off. You probably won't learn anything new at this point. But I'm just going to continue by tidying up my result sets. Let's get the column headings first of all. I'll do this in a slightly different way to the previous couple of videos. Let's start by declaring a variable called f as an adodb.field object or field class. Don't get confused by the fact that field doesn't appear in the IntelliSense. The class definitely exists. I discussed this in one of the earlier videos in this little series here. So I'll declare a variable. I'll just hit escape to clear the IntelliSense at that point. What I'm then going to do before I write out my result set into the worksheet, after I've selected the worksheet, I'm going to say for each f in result set.fields. And then I'll give myself a couple of blank lines and say next f. What I'll also do is keep track of how many fields I've processed. So to do that, I'm going to declare a variable called I as integer. And then inside my for each loop, what I'm going to do is say I equals I plus 1. So I is initialized to 0, so the first value it will hold inside the loop now will be 1. And then I can say ws.cells, open some round brackets and refer to row number 1, followed by column number I, so whichever value is held in the I variable. I'll then refer to the value property of that cell and make it equal to f.name, so the name property of the field object. You can clearly see that the field class must exist because I'm seeing a list of specific methods and properties for it. There we go. After I've copied all the results from the record set, I'll probably just change the column width, so I can say ws.range a1.current region to refer to the entire region of cells in which that one sits, then the entire column property to return the entire column, and then I can apply the auto fit method to that. I could then change things like the background color and the font color of the column headings, but I think that will probably suffice for now. So at this point, let me just first of all switch back into Excel and clear up some of these extra worksheets by selecting them all and right-clicking and deleting them. And then when I've done that, I can switch back to the Visual Basic Editor and run my Get Data from SQL Server subroutine again. And this time my new 6 worksheets should have the correct column headings and the correct column widths to read all the data contained within them. Okay, so there we go. Not a particularly complicated technique, but potentially quite an important one, this ability to loop until you run out of record sets to retrieve by using the next record set method. Hope you found that one useful. Thanks for watching. See you next time.